I'm Nina Nofel, and these are today's headlines. President Michel Sulaiman urges the Iranian embassy and Hezbollah to help investigators uncover the details of the deadly attack on protesters in the Hezbollah stronghold of Beirut's southern suburbs. Lebanese authorities investigate a roadside explosion which damaged a van and a car in Ta'nayel, east of Lebanon. And thousands of Syrian refugees fleeing from the battles in the Syrian city of Qusair take refuge in the border village of Adsail, as 85 people wounded in the fighting are transferred to hospitals. President Michel Sulaiman is urging the Iranian embassy and Hezbollah to help investigators uncover the details of a deadly attack on protesters in the Hezbollah stronghold of Beirut's southern suburbs. In a statement issued by the Babda Palace, Sulaiman stressed the importance of the cooperation of citizens and the region's parties, mainly Hezbollah, and the Iranian embassy to facilitate the mission of specialized agencies in revealing the circumstances of the incident. The president said unveiling the truth behind Sunday's attack would prevent the recurrence of similar incidents. Just to remind you, on Sunday, Hezbollah members wielding batons assaulted protesters from the Lebanese Option Party and killed one of them after shooting him in the abdomen outside the Iranian embassy in the neighborhood of Bir Hassan. Lebanese authorities are investigating a roadside explosion which damaged a van and a car in Ta'nayel, east of the country. Security sources speaking to the Daily Star on condition of anonymity said the 10:07 a.m. blast shattered the windows of a black BMW and a white van that were passing by. The owner of the BMW, who identified himself as Jirjis Bashalani from nearby Mrajat, was not injured. It was not clear, however, whether anyone was hurt in the van, which had at least a dozen passengers on board. Lebanese Army intelligence, detectives, members of the police's internal security forces, and state security promptly arrived at the scene of the explosion. According to a preliminary investigation, the bomb was placed along the international highway in Ta'nayel. The sources said that while the car came to a stop when the bomb exploded, the van continued on its journey toward the Beir Ilyes Road and then entered Syria via the Masna'a border crossing. Fears over the country's stability grew after an anti-Hezbollah protester was killed and several others were injured outside the Iranian embassy in Beirut in one of 3 rallies staged to protest the party's involvement in the Syrian war. The victim, identified as Hashim Salman, aged 28 years old, belonged to the Lebanese Option Party, a fierce Hezbollah critic. Later in the day, a large anti-Hezbollah rally in the city of Saida drew about 10,000 people, including 2,500 Syrians, but took place without incident. Addressing the rally in Saida and protected by police and 750 security personnel from Jama al-Islamiyah, which organized the event, speakers denounced Hezbollah for sending hundreds of its men to fight alongside regime forces against Syrian rebels. The protest outside the Iranian embassy was organized by the Lebanese Option Party, which is headed by Ahmed al-Assad, a Shia politician from south of Lebanon. Prime Minister-designate Tamam Salam should form the new cabinet this week or else step down and make way for someone else to fulfill the task, according to Lebanese Forces leader Samir Jaja. Jaja said and criticized Salam for postponing consultations to form the next government under the pretext of waiting for the results of recent challenges to Parliament's extension. Salam has said that he's stalling efforts to form the new cabinet, awaiting the results of a challenge filed to the Constitutional Council over the recent extension of Parliament's term for a period of 17 months. In his remarks to An-Nahar, Jaja also condemned the death of Hashim Salman, who died yesterday after he was attacked outside the Iranian embassy in Beirut, and blamed Hezbollah over the incident. He also slammed Hezbollah's growing role in the Syrian conflict, saying the illegal party has crossed the line and rendered the state impotent. Chairman of the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, Israeli Avigdor Lieberman, slammed the European Union for failing to label Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. He labeled the move as ultimate hypocrisy. Israeli media quoted Lieberman as saying that Israel must convey to the EU that failure to blacklist Hezbollah in an upcoming discussion on the topic in 2 weeks will make the EU irrelevant. Last week, several EU governments expressed concern that a British request to add Hezbollah on the list of terrorist organizations would increase instability in the Middle East. At a meeting in Brussels, the governments also questioned whether there was sufficient evidence to link Hezbollah to an attack that targeted Israeli tourists in Bulgaria last year. Britain has argued that Hezbollah should face EU sanctions over its alleged role in the bus bombing in the resort of Burgas that killed 5 Israelis and their Bulgarian driver. The Gulf Cooperation Council states are expected to take further measures to confront Hezbollah's involvement in the war raging in Syria, which will have a negative impact on the ties with the Lebanese state. A diplomatic source told Al-Liwat newspaper that the GCC's travel restriction advisory to Lebanon is a first step in a series of measures the Gulf states will adopt. Last week, the GCC urged their citizens to avoid traveling to Lebanon and called on their nationals who are already in the country to leave it. Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates took the decision based on the current unstable situation in the country. The source told the newspaper that the economic ties between Lebanon and the GCC countries will reach a critical stage if Hezbollah continues to interfere in Syria. Thousands of Syrian refugees fleeing from the battles in the Syrian city of Qusayd have taken refuge in the border village of Arsal, as 85 people wounded in the fighting were transferred to hospitals in the Bekaa Valley and north of Lebanon. There are now around 27,000 Syrian refugees in Arsal, which is nearly equal to the number of its residents, which is only 35,000. According to Arsal's deputy mayor Ahmed Fliti, the sudden influx of such a large number of refugees makes it impossible to obtain accurate statistics about the arrivals. An operation to evacuate the wounded began on Saturday in Qusayd. Security sources said, adding that 85 of the wounded had been transferred to hospitals in both North Lebanon and the Bekaa Valley. They said Lebanese Red Cross ambulances transported 50 of the wounded to hospitals in the western and central Bekaa Valley, and another 35 were taken to facilities in the north of the country, such as Khair Hospital in the town of Minye. Coming up next, Turkey's opposition party leader calls on Erdogan to calm tensions as protests enter their 11th day. Stay with us. Welcome back. Turkey's opposition party leader called on the prime minister to stop escalating tensions and dragging the country into the fire as anti-government protests that have led to 3 deaths enter their 11th day. Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan, meanwhile, headed a cabinet meeting to discuss the protest, the first serious challenge to his 10-year rule. A day earlier, Erdogan made a series of fiery speeches to thousands of his supporters, saying the government's patience is running thin, demanding an end to the protest and threatening to hold those who don't respect his government to account. He has also called major pro-government rallies in Ankara and Istanbul next weekend, raising the stakes for those opposing him in the streets and main squares in Turkish cities. The protests were sparked on May 31st by a violent police crackdown on a sit-in at a park on Taksim to prevent a redevelopment project that would replace the green space with a replica Ottoman barracks. They have since spread to 78 cities across the country. North and South Korea have agreed to hold senior-level talks this week in Seoul following marathon talks aimed at rebuilding trust after months of souring tension and threats of nuclear war. In a sign of the trust deficit that remains 6 decades after the armistice agreement, the talks between lower-level officials of each nation dragged on deep into Monday morning as the two sides struggled to agree on a framework for a more substantive dialogue. The 2-day meeting, starting on Wednesday, will focus on stalled cooperation projects, including the resumption of operations at a jointly run factory park near the border in North Korea that was the last remaining symbol of inter-Korean rapprochement. The last several years have seen North Korean nuclear tests, long-range rocket launches, and attacks blamed on the North that killed 50 South Koreans back in 2010. 3 near-simultaneous bombings, 2 car bombs and a suicide attack killed at least a dozen people in a fruit and vegetable wholesale market north of Baghdad. The blast went off in the predominantly Shia town of Judeid el-Shat, which lies just west of the restive city of Bakuba and remains one of Iraq's most dangerous. The explosions went off as the market was packed with grocery stall owners purchasing goods for the day's trading. No group immediately claimed responsibility for the attacks, but Sunni militants linked to al-Qaeda often target Shia Muslims, whom they regard as apostates, in simultaneous and mass casualty bombings. The violence comes amid a surge in attacks in Iraq, with unrest in May pushing the month death toll to the highest such figure since 2008, raising concerns of a revival of the all-out sectarian war that blighted the country in 2006 and 2007. Taliban militants launched a grenade and gun attack on Kabul airport, seizing 2 nearby buildings and firing on military facilities before being overwhelmed by Afghan security forces. 2 suicide bombers blew themselves up, and all 5 other attackers were killed in fighting as elite Afghani troops stormed the half-built properties where the militants had holed up. Loud explosions and sporadic bursts of small arms fire erupted for at least 4 hours after the attack woke up residents of the Afghani capital at about 4:30 a.m. Officials immediately hailed the security forces' response, with Adela Raz, a spokeswoman for President Hamid Karzai, praising their bravery and courage on her Twitter feed. The NATO coalition said that some international forces were involved in the operation against the militants, but that Kabul's increasingly professional quick response units were in the lead. Let's take a look at news around the world in brief. Conservative former Parliament Speaker Ghulam Ali Haddad Adel withdrew his candidacy from Iran's June 14 presidential election. Haddad Adel, a close advisor and a relative by marriage of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, had been a member of a coalition of conservative principlist candidates that included Tehran Mayor Mohammad Bakir Kalibaf and former Foreign Minister Ali Akbar Vilayati. He did not endorse a single candidate but called for a hardline conservative victory. Former CIA worker has revealed himself as the source of leaked information on a secret U.S. spy program that harvests internet and phone records of U.S. citizens and foreigners. Edward Snowden, the current employee of defense contractor Booz Allen Hamilton, said he leaked information on the PRISM program to protect basic liberties for people around the world. Snowden leaked a presentation on the PRISM surveillance system, which allows the U.S. National Security and Agency, the FBI, direct access to the servers of U.S. internet firms such as Google, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, and AOL. Germany battles against historic floods, wreaking death and destruction across Central Europe as a dike burst, forcing hundreds from their homes, but the Hungarian capital averted devastation. Parts of northern Germany continued to be threatened by the swollen river Elbe, where a dike was breached overnight in Saxony-Anhalt, adding hundreds to the already thousands of German residents to have been evacuated. The feel-good musical Kinky Boots, with songs by pop star and Broadway newcomer Cyndi Lauper, strutted away with the leading 6 2013 Tony Awards on Sunday, including Best Musical, Best Original Score, and Best Leading Man. Christopher Durang's comical Vanya and Sonia and Masha and Spike won the Best Play Tony. Neil Patrick Harris was back for his 4th turn as host and was once again crucial to keeping the show funny and smart. He opened with a razzle-dazzle bang amid dozens of dancers and singers, even getting boxer Mike Tyson to hoof, and closed in 3 hours later with rapping by Audra McDonald to Overworked and Power State of Mind. The Tonys, picked by 868 theater voters, capped a somewhat grim financial season on Broadway, in which the total box office take was flat and the number of ticket buyers slipped 6%. Both numbers were blamed in part on Superstorm Sandy, but high ticket prices and the lack of long-term audience growth has many worried. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Let me remind you of our headlines. President Michel Sleiman urges the Iranian embassy and Hezbollah to help investigators uncover the details of a deadly attack on protesters in the Hezbollah stronghold of Beirut's southern suburbs. Lebanese authorities investigate a roadside explosion which damaged a van and a car in Ta'nail, east of Lebanon. And thousands of Syrian refugees fleeing from the battles in the Syrian city of Qusayr take refuge in the border village of Arsel as 85 people wounded in the fighting are transferred to hospitals. Those are your Monday headlines live on Future Television in Beirut. I'm Yumna Naufal. Stay tuned for Noor Aesh. She's coming up next with French.